Hello and welcome to the Heart of Collaboration. I'm Bernice Belt and I get to be the host producer of this great show. And as usual, we have an outstanding guest. And for your pleasure and for your education about some good stuff going on right here in Paducah, the award-winning Paducah, Kentucky, we have Pastor Anthony Daniels, who is the pastor of what I call the Groovy Grove, or it's groovy at the Grove, but it's Pleasant Grove Baptist Church right here in Paducah, Kentucky. Hello, Pastor Daniels.
Hello, Dr. Belt. It's good to be here with you.
Oh, it's so good to be here. I'm so glad we could do it because I know you're still commuting. And so it worked out. It worked out. And the executive director here, Tom Butler, he gave me some dates to consider so that you would have some flexibility. And I tell you, teamwork makes the dream work.
It does, and I appreciate that. I do. I appreciate it because I wanted to come on.
Yes. Well, new pastor.
Yes,
new pastor, that's the emphasis. And so this is all about you. This is your show, Pastor Daniel. I'm just going to facilitate. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right, all right. Well, first of all, tell us some of your background, where you're from, some of your journey from there to get to Paducah, Kentucky.
Well, I was born in Lexington Park, Maryland. My dad was in the Navy, had been in the Navy about 30 years before he retired. I was born and raised, well, not raised there, I was born there. And we stayed there roughly, probably 15 months. And then the military transferred him to Guam, and then California. Then we went to Kansas City, then back to California. And we did that like, I think maybe 3 times, back and forth to different parts of California, different parts of Kansas City, Missouri area. And then, let's see, the last place, well, second to the last place my dad was stationed at was in California, Long Beach, California. And then we moved to Oak Harbor, Washington, which is about 2.5 hours north of Seattle, Washington. And that's really where I call home. I consider Seattle home. I lived there the longest, about 10 years. And that's where the Lord called me into ministry. He had been prodding me, I guess, for a while to do that. And I didn't want to do that. You know, I saw my dad go through that because he was also a pastor of a church. And I thought to myself, that's not the life for me. You know, I don't want to do that. But God saw something different, and in 1992, I preached my trial sermon, and I don't think they call them trial sermons anymore, but back in the day, 92, that's what they called them. And then in 1995, I was ordained. And so I've been on this journey ever since. I'm just trying to do what God tells me to do, and when He wants me to do it, and how He wants me to do it.
How was Daddy's reaction when you let him know? When you let him know for sure?
He was, I don't think he was too shocked because as a pastor, you know your members. And I guess also as my father, he knew his son. And he knew I was not so much rebelling, but he knew that there was more for me to do than just be a deacon at the church or, you know, help with this, to that, and the other of the church. He knew there was a greater calling on my life. And in fact, the pastor that we had when in one of his times, he lived in Kansas City, Missouri, Dr. Ford, who passed away about a month ago. He wrote in a book when we joined that church in 1979. He said the Daniels family has joined Second Missionary, and there's 4 boys, and the second son, he said there's something about the second son. The Lord is going to do great things in his life. Now at that time I was 12 years old, had no idea. Fast forward 1987 or 88, I went back there, and he said, come here, let me show you something. The pastor Ford, he said, let me show you something. And he said, this is something I wrote in this book. I'm sorry, it was 1995. He said, this is something I wrote in the book about you. And he said, look what has happened in all that time. So people around me could see the ministry, but I didn't see the ministry. Or maybe I should say I didn't want to see the ministry. But, and then 1996, I got married. My wife joined the military. She came out of college. When she graduated from college, she joined the Army. And we've been traveling around the country ever since, and we ended up at Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
Well, you and your wife were a good fit because you were a military kid.
I was, and it's amazing how many people ask me, how can you stand all that moving? I mean, you're moving all the time, but I don't know any other way. Really, I don't. I can't imagine living someplace more than 3 or 4 years, but because we're always on the move. But it's second nature. It's in my blood, so I love it.
Pastor, have you pastored a church before you came to Pleasant Grove, Paducah?
Yes, ma'am. My first pastorate was in El Paso, Texas, St. Peter's Missionary Baptist Church, and I was there a little bit over a year. And then I was called to an interim pastorate at Bethel Second Baptist Church in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We moved, and then we came to Washington D.C. And strangest thing happened. We moved to Washington D.C. The movers who moved our furniture from Texas to D.C. broke my vacuum cleaner. So I had to drive. I'm driving around trying to figure out where can I go to get this vacuum cleaner fixed. So I went into a furniture store and I asked this lady where to go. She told me, she said, well, if you go down this big street here, Silver Hills Road, look on your left, you'll see the vacuum cleaner repair office. So as I'm driving down the road, and the Lord shows me, he turns my head, he showed me this building on the left-hand side, this church building, First Baptist Church, Suitland. And I thought, oh, that's nice, and I kept on driving. Well, about a week later, they called me and said my vacuum cleaner was working. I went to go pick it up. I come back down the road. This time, it's on my right. And the Lord, literally, my head was like turned like this. He said, showed me this church. I thought, Lord, why do you keep showing me this church? What is it about this church you want me to see? I disregarded it because in Washington State, most of our First Baptist churches were all Caucasian. Mm-hmm. And I knew we were going to have to find a church to go to. And I thought, Lord, I know you don't want me to go to a Caucasian church. Is that what? I said, but if that's what you want, But I totally dismissed it. About probably 3 weeks later, our church, the church that we were attending and we had joined, was having a revival. I was an armor bearer that night for the evangelist. He stayed that Friday night. Well, it was Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. That Friday night, he stayed till almost 10 o'clock that night. So I got home. My wife was like, where have you been? And she said, what, church took this long? I said, well, yeah. Because usually,
what now?
She said, you were in church this long? Because usually I'm home by 9:15. Yes. So it was after 10, but I had to get him in the car and everything. So I got home almost 10:30. And she said, some man has called twice for you tonight. Some deacon. I said, from deacon from where? She said, the church. She said, he was talking. All he did was give me his number and ask if you would please give him a call. So I said, they're looking for a pastor. I said, okay, but he didn't give you the name of the church? She said, honey, he never gave me the name of the church. So I said, okay. So the next day I called him. I'm talking to him on the phone, and I said, well, sir, you're telling me about your church. I said, but you never told me the name of your church. He said, oh, I'm so sorry. We're First Baptist Church, Suitland. Ah. So I went over there. I talked to him for a while. The following Sunday I preached. They voted that Sunday afternoon, and I was with them for like 9 months as their interim.
Yes.
And so it was a great experience. And sometimes I tell ministers, I said, who don't want an interim pastor, I said, you'll get your best training as an interim pastor. Mm-hmm. Because you learn a whole lot about yourself, you learn a whole lot about people, and you're able to exercise your gifts. Helps you to do a lot of different things that, you can make decisions, you can say things that the pastor, mm-hmm. quote unquote, real pastor, can't say. Mm-hmm. You can just tell like it is and keep on going because, you're just the interim.
Right. So because you're going to go out the door.
Because I'm going to go out the door.
And, let's segue from talking about your position as interim, mm-hmm. that wonderful 9 years of your life. Mm-hmm. I know it was great. Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about your wife and your children for a little while. And, I tell people all the time, there's a difference in boasting in your flesh and mm-hmm. boasting in the Lord. Yeah. So we're going to boast in the Lord for a little while about Lady Daniels and your children. Yeah.
I am married to the Queen of the Jamaican Nile. I am married to the Reverend Dr. Colleen Althea Daniels. Mm. We've been married 20 years. This past August was 20 years. I met her in 1995 in Everett, Washington at a revival. Silliest thing, let me see, we met kind of, sort of in 1995. I was there to pray for a revival, and I turned around. I was in the pulpit. I turned around, and there was this girl sitting in the choir stand, and she was in there with all the youth, so I thought she was one of the young people, but I could not get her off my mind, and to the point where it took me 9 months to even say hello to her, and all her friends knew who I was. They all knew that I liked her. And I just couldn't twist my lips to say hello. It took me forever to get it straight. But we ended up having our first date on Valentine's Day, 1995 is when it was. We met. I saw her for the first time in '94, and we've been together since that Valentine's Day, 1995. And we have 2 daughters. My oldest is Lindsay. She's she's a senior in high school at Rossview High School in Clarksville. And then my youngest one is Courtney. She is a freshman at the high school there in Clarksville. And both of them are doing gangbuster things and just great things, and I'm so proud of both of them. My wife, as I said earlier, is in the Army, has been for 20 years. She's an occupational therapist. She has a doctorate in public health, a master's in public health, and a bachelor's degree in occupational therapy. So she has been preaching since 2003. I call her Hurricane Colleen because when she gets done, it's done. I mean, she tears up a place, just letting the Lord use her as mightily as He can. So I am just excited for her and what God is doing with her, her opportunities to preach. I stand back and let her just go. You know, I'm not one of those pastors who hold associate ministers back or criticize for women ministers or like that. I don't do all that.
Bless your heart.
No, there's no room for that in ministry, because you might be able to meet somebody reach somebody as a female that I as a male can never reach, and that's just because of my gender. And so I cannot sit back and hold you back from doing what God has called you to do, because I may have a preconceived notion in my head that says, oh, women aren't supposed to. So no, I don't do that.
Awesome, awesome. And I know that pleases the heart of God.
I'm sure it does.
Yes.
I'm sure it does.
Let's talk a little bit then about ministries, and obviously there was a search committee, and you are the result of the church committee. So many of us have already congratulated you. But let's move to any existing ministry or ministries at the church that you and your leadership team are growing up some more. And then from there, maybe share any ministries that you are talking about or that you are planning on bringing to life there at Pleasant Grove Baptist Church.
Well, one thing, let me say this: we are 150 years strong. In October, we'll be celebrating our 150th church anniversary. And of course, all of Paducah, you're all welcome to come out there and celebrate with us. We're excited about that. We're excited about the fact that the Lord is doing great things at Pleasant Grove Church. People who had left the church while they were without a pastor are coming back. And I receive people based on their confession of their wanting to come back. I don't ask you, where have you been? What have you been doing?
Good.
Because in a lot of cases, it's none of my business. In fact, not a lot of cases. 9 times out of 10, it's none of my business. And like I tell them, I said, unless you're an axe murderer, that's something I need to know about. But other than that, you know, I don't need to know where you've been.
Yeah.
And I try to tell the members, I said, and I base that upon the book of Luke with the prodigal son. The Bible says that he went off, he did his thing, and when he came back, the boy was so busy trying to apologize to the father for where he had been and what he had done.
Yes.
And the father didn't even hear a word he said. All he said was, put some shoes on my son's feet, a robe on his back, and get him something to eat.
No, yes.
That's all he said.
That's right.
And so that's the same mantra that we should have as a church. We don't need to know where people have been, you know, because 9 times out of 10, people will start getting judged for that.
Yes.
And people say, well, you know, they were this or they were that. Well, I don't do that at Pleasant Grove. I don't do that. I want to make sure, the one thing that God told me was that Pleasant is the name of our church. And so as I was sitting there thinking about, you know, yes, Pleasant, and the Lord was talking to me, and I said, well, yeah, Lord, I know the name of the church is Pleasant Grove. And he said, well, that's what their responsibility is, to be pleasant. And so our theme, our mantra at our church is pleasant is our name, and to be pleasant is our aim. And we're to be a pleasant people. And that comes from Psalms 120, 123 rather, when it says that behold how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together in unity. And that's how it's supposed to be. We are to dwell together in unity. And so my goal is for us to be a pleasant church.
Yes.
And so in order to make that happen, well, we're working with our women's ministry. We're growing the women's ministry. We're growing the men's ministry. The youth, which I call my babies, every last one of them is one of my children. Maybe not physically, obviously,
Yes.
but spiritually, they're my children. And so I make sure, we've got a great youth department, great youth leaders who make sure that every Wednesday night those children are in there. I call them, I don't want people call people children, kids.
Yeah, yes.
They're children.
Yes.
I call them children. But the children, the babies are back there, and we've got literally from babies all the way up to high school. And we're working with each and every one of them. We're making sure that Christ is the focal point of their life, so that and also that they can come to their pastor. I'm not one of those and that's for any member of my church, is that I want to make sure they know that I have an open door policy. I don't want them to have to go through 15, 20 people to get to me. Honestly, Dr. Belt, I'm not that important. I don't see myself as being that important of a person. My goal is to make sure people can access the pastor so that when you have questions, you have a concern, you can call and talk to me. I can't do everything for you. Some things you got to go to the Lord about.
And so, Pastor Daniels, what you're saying is that you are a servant leader.
Yeah.
You are not the leader, you're the servant leader. And so you show them by your behavior, by your decorum, by your actions,
Exactly.
how to be a servant. And still there is the understanding that you're the pastor, and there should always be that understanding, of course, but that you're not elitist.
No.
And when you refer to the children as your babies, your children, what you're also demonstrating is that whole spirit of God being the sovereign Father, and you being that earthly spiritual servant leader that's serving as a spiritual father in human form.
Exactly.
To those children.
Exactly.
And some of those children may not have the father figures that we would all think are ideal for them. Many of us who are out here now, grown folk, some of us didn't have that as well.
Exactly.
And so what are some of the sweet details that you follow and that you interject on a regular basis that you know ensures that they know that you love them to the core?
It's real simple, Dr. Bell. I tell them.
You tell them.
I tell them. I tell them all the time. I tell them every time I get, Pastor loves you. You know that, right? And so, in case you don't know, Pastor Daniels loves you very much. And one of the things that I put in was that during our service, after we welcomed our visitors, I asked a question. I said, "Has everybody gotten a hug today?" And some of them will say, "No, I didn't get a hug." Young children and adults. I said, "You didn't get a hug today? Oh, we've got to do something about that." So I tell the church, I said, "Get up from wherever you are and go around. Let's give each other a hug, because that's what we need to do. Because for some people, that's all they get.
Yes.
That's all they get."
Indeed.
And one of the things in Rick Warren's book, The Purpose-Driven Life, the very first chapter, the very first sentence, he says, "This is not about you." And so as a pastor, and that's just not for me, that's for all pastors, we need to realize that this ministry is not about you. We're there to serve and not be served. I am one of the people who if we have a dinner, we have something, I don't jump in front of everybody and say, "Well, I'm the pastor here," or I'm the minister here," whatever. No, let the people go first and let them eat. And trust me, there'll be something left when it's my turn to get something to eat. That's how I think. That's my philosophy. And so, to answer your question real simply, you have to let people know that they are loved.
There
You have
go.
to let them know that they are important. You have to let them know that their mistakes, their sins are no different than yours or mine. That you can't sit back and say, "Well, I don't do what she did, I don't do what he does." But no, you haven't done what he or she did, but you've done this.
That's right.
And so let's focus on this for a minute, since you want to pick on this one and this one. And as we realize and recognize that all of us have sinned, according to Romans,
Yes.
all of us have fallen short, according to Romans. We've all fallen short of God's glory. But also Romans tells us that, but thanks be unto God, or Corinthians, where who gives us the victory through Jesus Christ our Lord. And so we can sit back and say, "Man, yeah, I've done some things. Yeah, I've made some mistakes, but God still loves me." So who am I to sit back and criticize you? Now, I'm going to let you know if you're wrong, but I'm going to do it in love. I'm going to let you know in love. You know what? Yeah, you messed up. But here's where grace comes in.
Yes.
Even when we have messed up, the Bible says, while we were yet in our sin, Christ died for the ungodly.
Yes.
And I don't care who you are, what you might think about yourself, You and I were the ungodly. We are the ungodly.
Yes.
And yet, in spite of what he saw where I was at and what I was doing, he still sent his son to die. Even if it was just for me, he would have done it just for me. And that's how you have to look at it.
Yes. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. He loved the world. And so that was all inclusive. I love the way God operates. It's so totally different from the way the world does.
But can I say something else on John 3:16? John 3:16 is great. But what I love is John 3:17. He said, I did not come here to condemn the world.
Yes.
Isn't that something?
Yes.
He said, I love you, and I didn't come here to condemn you. So if Jesus didn't come here to condemn us in our sinful state, who am I to condemn you? Who am I to criticize you? Who am I to talk down to you because you're doing something that I wouldn't necessarily do? But then there's something that I'm doing that you wouldn't necessarily do.
And so
All of us.
restoration,
It is.
goodness.
It is. And the Lord gave me a message a while back, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, about the place of refuge.
Yes.
And the church, because we spent about 14 weeks in the book of Joshua. Every week I preach from the chapter from the book of Joshua. And so a little bit more than 14 weeks. So, but one of the things he talked about was the Lord told him that you guys have built everything, did everything, but you still need a place of refuge for people. And the church is the place of refuge. We're good to say it's a hospital, but the question is, when people come to the hospital of the church, are they getting helped or are they getting hurt? See, and then until we
sick
and leave even
stay
worse,
sicker.
and leave worse than they got there.
Broken.
That's right. That's right. So, but if it's a place of a real hospital,
Yes.
if it's a place of refuge, the place of refuge is where I can come to get myself together. It's the rehabilitation place. That when I am broken and when I am sick and when I don't know what else to do, I can come to the house of refuge and I can come there and nobody's going to belittle me. Nobody's going to talk bad to me. Nobody's going to tell me because I'm a single parent with 3 and 4 children and I'm on welfare. Nobody's going to look down on me because of that. You know, because all of us needed a helping hand somewhere along the way.
Yes.
You know, and it's our job to reach to them
Yes.
and help them, because we're supposed to be that place of refuge, and we're not, then what are we? We're just a country club.
Yes. And a place of refuge protects.
Exactly.
You educate.
Exactly.
You're going to deal with it.
Exactly.
You admonish, but you protect them.
That's right.
They've been hurt and wounded and scarred, and so you protect them from that happening again.
Exactly.
In the household of faith, the house
That's
of
right.
prayer.
That's right. That's the name Pleasant.
Yes, yes.
That's the name Pleasant.
Men's ministry, women's ministry, children's ministry. Spinning off of those, or anything new that you see in the not so distant future, you and your leaders may be talking about, something you might be able to share right now.
What I want to do, because I haven't really had a chance to really sit down and talk a whole lot with my leadership, but what I want to be able to do is make sure that people know that if you're a leader, for example, lead by example. Let people see Christ in you. The future holds great possibilities for us, and we have no reason to feel like, you know, just we're that small church on 14th and Burnett.
Yes.
Well, first of all, I tell the people we're not a small church. We're as big as we think we are.
That's right.
And growing as fast as we want to grow. And so our men's ministry, which is going to be starting doing evangelism and outreach, the same thing, men and women's ministry. My wife, First Lady Colleen, is over the women's ministry at the church. And so my wife grew up basically in poverty in Jamaica. But this girl who literally had to do her homework and the street lights outside in Jamaica is now a doctor. See, and that's because of God's grace. And so she and I both look at life and say, you know what? We've come from this, and we want to take everybody to this, to this place. One thing I love about the book of Daniel, though Daniel got the opportunity to grow and to become somebody big, he looked back. If you read Daniel, I think it's Daniel chapter 3, he looked back at Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego and brought them along with him. He didn't get the big head and think, okay, now I'm this, so you got to figure out how you're going to get this. We don't do ministry that way.
All right.
We have to reach back. Our men have to reach back and get other men. Our women have to reach back and get other women. You know, youth had to go get other youth, because the sheep beget the sheep.
Wow.
They get the sheep. And it's my job when they come is to help them along the way.
When when your wife is operating in her gifts, I know that the reaction has been wonderful because women, like men, are hungry for strong, anointed leadership. Also, I know that the youth ministry was established when you got there, so I know you were excited about where they were at that moment, because that allowed you to build up on what was there and to raise your elbows so that you could get busy doing some other things while you were still building up on that. That's a wonderful thing for a pastor, especially for a pastor not to have to come in and start from scratch.
Exactly.
You have two strong associate ministers, Reverend Evans and Reverend Coffey. You have some strong leaders in teaching Sunday school. And I know that the viewers are glad to hear that. I think most of us are very sad when we know that pastors have to struggle, and so we're happy that you don't have to do that. You can grow and glow, you know, based upon the beautiful foundation that they kept going while they were without someone in the pulpit. Well, in terms of your community involvement, I know that you've become almost immediately involved with the Community Clergy Fellowship.
Exactly.
You were the guest rhema bearer at the Dr. Martin Luther King breakfast in January. And you've been trying to get involved in the last fall revival, being part of the program lineup where we had a guest rhema bearer to come. Do you foresee anything else right now that you're going to be doing outside the walls of Pleasant Grove?
One thing that I want to do, I want to get more involved with the community as far as with the police department. I've got one of my youth works with the police department there, works with the police department here in Paducah, and so and then we had Chief Barnhill came to our church.
Awesome.
He brought 2 other police officers with him.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just really discuss how we as a church can reach out to them and they can reach back to us.
Awesome.
Because if we have the mentality of us, we're against the police department,
Yes.
and the police department's against us, we're never going to get anywhere.
Never, never.
We're never going to get anywhere.
Well, you met a stellar leader in our community, Chief of Police Brandon Barnhill.
Yes.
And I'm sure that already, because that's the way he is, you've already seen him to be the person that you're going to be able to work with and to serve with, and vice versa. I'm happy in Jesus that you're doing that, and you did it so early on. Our time is up, and we're going to have to sign off. You know, I told you in the beginning when you were having fun, this half hour goes so quickly.
It does.
We'd like to have you back in a few months or sometime when you're ready to come back and give us an update.
That's
You can even, maybe by that time, you'll be able to bring First Lady Daniels.
I hope to be able to do that.
God bless you, Pastor Daniel.
No,
So
God
glad
bless
you're
you.
here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so very much.
You're welcome. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. And you be sure to go and hang out at Pleasant Grove Baptist Church in Paducah, Kentucky, the first opportunity you get. See you next time.